Okay, we see some answers coming in from all of you guys on the call tonight. Again, thank you for joining. We see some parents have found a quiet place for their child. They've tried to be actively engaged. They're enrolling their son in different group classes so that he knows that this is the new normal for now. We see that homework is a lot less coming from the teachers for a week, and that all of it can be done in like 2 hours. So providing the right environment for them. These are great tips, and we have several other tips to share with you guys tonight. We'll let a few more responses come in and then see what else you guys think and what our amazing panelists have to share tonight. Okay, we have about a minute left before we get started. And so I just wanted to continue reading some of these great tips, providing the right environment, setting a fixed place where they should be distraction-free, and encouraging them to adapt. My son is 3 years old, and I'm doing lots of arts activities. So through that, he has learned a lot, although he's too young, but he's always super excited. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nita. Munira has set a dedicated study area that is quiet, and nope, they're coming in so fast I can't even keep up. Okay, Asmina is creating a daily schedule and a routine. Rosina is giving them frequent breaks, and Ahil is setting a goal, and keeping routine is critical for his child. Akbar is making sure that he talks to his child or children about what's going on in their experience. You guys can keep reading too, and if you open the chat box. Binish says setting a fixed place. These are great. Again, if you guys are just joining us, we are asking you to type one thing that you are doing that is helping your child succeed in virtual learning right now. We're here to share some more. We have some great panelists lined up for you tonight, and we just want to hear from you what's been working, and maybe some parents can learn right now before we even get started what's working for you. Kashmira is giving her kids space to work quietly. Layla's creating a schedule. You guys have already picked up some of the great tips that we'll be sharing, and we hope you'll learn some more tonight. Rosina is giving them space and quiet. Great job. Okay, well, before we get started, we also just wanted to put a quick poll out there to see who's in the audience. So this poll is 2 questions. We're just asking you how many children do you have? Please answer that. And the next question is, what grade is your child or your children in? It's multiple choice. If for some reason you're not able to select more than one option, just please select the youngest age of your child so that we know kind of what the youngest is. Or if you want to select the oldest, that's fine too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll, and I'll show you guys the results right after. I think I may be blocking the screen, but Noreen, are you able to see the poll results?
I can.
Oh, okay, great. So then we don't have to switch screens. Let's see, we have, can expand it so that we can see everything coming in. I have a lot of people with just 1 child or 2 children at the moment. A lot of elementary school or preschool families joining us tonight. All right, and we have some people typing in the chat box. We have 11 children or maybe an 11th grader. I'm not sure, but either way, both are difficult. So 4th grade, 2 school-age kids, can't hit submit. Oh no. Okay, well, feel free to type it in the chat box if you're unable to put it into the poll yourself. Oh, poll doesn't go higher than 3rd grade. Well, this was just a quick snapshot, but yes, sorry about that. That's our fault. But We see some 10th, 12th graders, 6th graders, so we have the whole spectrum on tonight. This gives our panelists a great idea about what's going on and who they'll be talking to tonight. So without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. If Noreen, Eliza, Munira, you guys are ready? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, we're ready. Awesome. So thank you guys for sharing what you have been doing at home. We are also, all of that's in the chat box, so you can take a look at that later on tonight. Also, just want to start by saying Yali Madat and thank you for joining us on this session. We have been putting on a lot of programs through Education Board to try to keep your families engaged, and we know that this is a very unique time for you guys as you start the school year fully virtually. Some of you have never, most of you have never met the teacher your child is working with, and your children are doing that all through a computer screen right now. So we're hoping we can provide you with some social emotional tools as well as some tips that are more practical for you to help your child succeed and for you to do well in this time as a parent and a teacher in your home. All right, so if you can just go to the next slide, Noreen. Thank you. Wanted to start off with a quick message. I know setting the stage with some of the keywords Hazri Mom has shared with us in the past really helps. This one is from 2008 when Maulana Hazri Mom visited Atlanta, and he gave a speech at the annual meeting of the International Baccalaureate. He said that the most important skill anyone can learn is the ability to go on learning. In a world of rapid change, an agile and adaptable mind, a pragmatic and cooperative temperament, a strong ethical orientation, these are increasingly the keys to effective leadership. So that speech, the full speech is available online if you want to check it out. But we really want to just remind everyone, stay agile, try to adapt, and you got to keep learning. Doesn't mean the learning stops just because the location changes. So thank you so much. I just wanted to, I didn't introduce myself, but my name is Anita Hasni. I'm a member of the Aga Khan Education Board USA. Previously was chairman for the Southeast Education Board here locally, and professionally, I'm a research and policy analyst at the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning, which focuses on early childhood education and children's development. I received my PhD in developmental psychology prior to joining the government agency, and I have a very strong interest in education, research, and policy, and children's development overall. And I want to share with you, I'm really excited to be on this webinar with these panelists who are also very, very highly accomplished, and I'm so excited that they're here tonight to share with you all of the great tools and tidbits. So we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. This is just a quick outline. We do have a jam-packed session, so feel free to be engaged through the chat. I will be documenting the questions that come in and trying to address as many as possible via chat. At the end, we'll also have a Q&A session as I moderate this, but social emotional health is one of the things we're going to kick it off with, and then setting expectations, positive reinforcement, and nurturing a growth mindset, setting up the structure and the physical environment for your child, and just reminding you it takes a village and you don't have to do it alone. So thank you so much. Yes, and the next slide. This is the exciting slide where I get to tell you about the panelists. So I'd like to start off, you should be able to see all of them, even if your camera's turned off. Our first panelist is Dr. Noreen Madani. She is the Associate Director of Faculty Development at Columbia University's School of Professional Development. She teaches faculty how to teach in online and face-to-face classrooms. She is also the chairperson of Aga Khan Education Board Northeast at the moment. Dr. Eliza Hussain is an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Buffalo. Her research interests include exploring predictors of teacher and principal quality and turnover, and modeling principal and teacher effects on student outcomes in schools. And our third panelist is Munira Salim. She holds a master's degree in early childhood and special education from NYU, and she's currently a preschool special education lead teacher at New York Center for Child Development. She's also taught all 3 levels of ECDC and is currently serving as an ECDC coordinator. So that's a tough task too. But I think I can turn it over to our first panelist so you guys can take over from here. And I'll be on in a little while. Thanks, Noreen.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so this is fun. We're going to start off just by talking about self-care. I know that when we hear the word self-care, some of us think of yoga and massages and, aromatherapy, but that's not exactly the kind of self-care we're going to talk about today. We're going to ask you to breathe. So I would like everybody to start just by taking a deep breath and let it out. And the reason I do that is because we're living tough times right now. Most of us are struggling to do our jobs, whatever career we have. We're trying to be at home. We're trying to parent. We're trying to do the housework. We're trying to do all of the other stuff that is kind of going on around us. And I wanted to start by saying it is difficult, but it's also important to just stop and breathe for a second. And I hope that we will be able to give you some tips of how to take care of yourself before you take care of anybody else. We've been trying to homeschool in an emergency situation. This is not regular, oh, I chose to homeschool. And so I've prepared for it. I've thought about it. I have the structure for it. We're all kind of just making do and making it happen in whatever way that we can. So what we can do, the goal here is for today is to step out of the box and think about what we can achieve rather than stress about what we can't, right? Children are resilient and they'll bounce back. So I wanted to just start us off with that. Have a chai, have a cookie, take a deep breath. And just framing this in self-compassion. There's a lot of uncertainty, right? When are schools opening? Are they not opening? Are we going to get a vaccine? Are we not going to get a vaccine? When is my child going to go back to school fully? If my child is going to school, is he or she or they going, are they going to be okay? Why is my neighbor not wearing a mask? All of those things. So accept that there is uncertainty and decide what's best for your family, right? You can only decide what is best for your family. It's easy to say, so-and-so is doing this and so-and-so is doing that. And we're kind of surrounded by that community pressure. So it's really important to say, this is what's good for my family, my child, and to start off with that. Distinguish between productive and unproductive worries, right? An example of an unproductive worry is my child or is my family going to be sick if they go to school or if they go play with a neighbor or whatever it is. A productive worry is, how can I make this learning experience or this time the best possible time for my child, right? So I can worry about that and put steps into place because that's under my control, right? So thinking about that and distinguishing that really helps me. I'll tell you, there's a lot of just, off topic, there's a lot of construction going on around my house right now. So an unproductive worry is, oh my God, I'm so stressed out. I hate these people around me. But there's actually nothing I can do about it. What I can do is wake up a little bit earlier so that before the banging starts, I can have my peaceful cup of chai, right? So it's thinking about it when you reframe it, you suddenly realize there are things that are under control that you can feel better about. And I think most importantly, it's think about what your values are, practice those every day, and cultivate a sense of compassion. It's okay. We're all dealing with a lot. We have a lot on our plates. There's a lot of stress around us. There's a lot of anxiety. And all of your family members together are also dealing with a lot, right? So be that, constantly try to step back and have that self-compassion that this is a lot. It's okay to be stressed. What can I do? What's under my control so that I can feel better? We've also all been at this point where, as a parent, I have a teenager, and we all worry about, oh my God, my child is falling behind. They're never going to go to Harvard. They're never going to graduate school. Or I'm an inadequate parent because I don't understand the schoolwork. Or, I feel guilty. As a parent, all of these things will have run through your mind at some point or the other. And I think it's important to, again, go back to that concept of what can you control? There's a lot of things that under normal circumstances you might not allow. Screen time is one of them, right? But what can you do to make that screen time pleasant? What can you do around the screen time that would enable a good learning environment for your child? So there's, I really like this quote from Sue Atkins. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. We all try to be, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the best that we can. So be a real one. And I think what we mean by that, be a real one, is acknowledge that life is not super easy right now and that we're all trying to do the best that we can. So if you reframe, and we're going to talk about this word reframing, thinking about that construction, I can stress about it, but if I reframe and say, okay, I don't want to wake up with that banging in my head, I can reframe and say, I can wake up an hour earlier and sit down and have an hour to myself without the banging on my head, right? It's a reframing. So when you think about your kids today in this environment, they're resilient. I think if you remember that, first of all, children bounce back. And the other thing to remember, I think, is when this is over, most schools will really make an effort to bring all children up to speed. So they might not be learning all the algebra or all the calculus or all the alphabet that you would like them to learn. But once this is over, you and your school and your teacher and your community can make an effort to bring them up to speed, right? So today what we can do is focus on providing the best possible opportunities for our children in these times. The last thing I want to say on this is there's a lot of research that coming out of Harvard Center on the developing child. The single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. Single most common factor for children is a caring, supportive, committed relationship. So if you can step back from your stress and reframe and can really emphasize to your child, you're in this together and you are here to support your child no matter what else is happening. And if you take care of yourself so that you're not constantly stressed and unhappy, you're modeling how we react to stress. You're giving your child that resilience to whatever comes their way, they can make it through, right? So that was just, I wanted us to start off with that. And I'm going to now hand over to Eliza to talk about your child's social-emotional health. We've talked a little bit about ourselves. We're going to now turn to how our children are feeling.
Thank you, Chair Noreen. So now we're going to shift gears to thinking about your child. So, you looked after yourself, you're in an airplane, you put on your mask first. Let's move on to our children and think about how to help them. Next slide, please. So what's really important here is to talk to your child, right? This is hard. This is hard for you. This is hard for them. Social isolation is hard. Their routines have changed. And there is some research to show that what helps build the resilience that Chair Noreen was talking about is communication. So don't be afraid to talk to them. What is important is how you talk to them. Can you go to the next slide? So here we want to emphasize that while communication is key, your child also internalizes what you say in very interesting ways. So if you say something like, oh, I cannot believe my kids are not going to school, what they hear is, oh, I'm a burden to my mom and dad. If you say something like, oh my God, my children are not going to learn anything online, they're going to think, okay, school's a waste of time. I'm not going to be part of school. So we give you some more examples here. You want to talk about how this is hard. You want to talk about how they're feeling, how you're feeling, but you want to be careful about how you're saying it. So we come back to this idea of reframing that Chair Noreen talked about. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of reframing, right? Instead of saying, oh, I have to stay at home, you can say, hey, I get to stay at home with my kids and do all of these interesting projects. Instead of saying, oh, I have to be a part-time teacher for my kids, you can say, I get to learn with my kids, right? So have these conversations, acknowledge that you're in this together, but reframe how you're talking about it. Try to add a positive spin. That'll help you, it'll help them as well. don't shy away from these conversations, but be mindful about how you approach it. Next slide. The other part of your job as a parent is to reflect and assess. And this is not so much as, oh my God, there's something that I need to do. This is because you know your child the best, right? So a lot of you gave suggestions on what you've done at home to set up this wonderful learning environment for your children. We're asking you to take that a step forward. You know best how your child thrives. So when you're thinking about, and Chair Noreen will talk about this later, rewards and consequences, or you talk about routines and schedules, you want to keep in mind what works best for your child. So I'll give you an example. I loved reading, I still love reading. So as a kid, what would work for me is if my mom said, hey, if you do this, you can go read your Enid Blyton for an hour. That wouldn't work for my brother. He was into sports. So for him, what worked was do an hour of math and then you can go and play cricket, right? So differentiate for your child because you know your child best. Another example is I work really well in quiet. And so a lot of you talked about how you set up a quiet space. I was talking to a colleague and her children actually work really well with background noise. So she set up this YouTube video that's sort of a coffee shop on loop where you can hear a coffee shop in the background. And she just has that playing because her kids like hearing humans in the background. So when you take a minute to pause and reflect and assess, you can actually come up with the best virtual learning environment for your child because you know them best. Next slide. The other part of reflecting and assessing happens as a family. So this is where you bring your child in as well. Every day you want to try and take a little bit of time to reflect on the day with the family. What worked? What could have gone better? What can be done differently? And think about the next day or the next week, keeping in mind these lessons. So what you're trying to communicate to yourselves and to your children is that this is a learning process, right? We're growing day by day. Virtual learning is hard. We all know that. So even after you take all these tips, you may not get it right in a day. You may not get it right in a week, but you will get it right in a few weeks. You have to stay persistent and you have to approach it with this idea of, I'm going to keep learning and improving, and I'm going to bring my children into this conversation. What rewards worked? What consequences did not work? What part of the schedule can we change? Again, communicate with them. That's going to help them feel in charge of their learning, and that's going to help develop this resilience. Next slide, please. Back to you, Chair Noreen.
Thank you. I think that's the key. And what we're going to talk about next is how do you set these expectations? And I think it starts with what Aliza said, right? Communicate with them. And you'd be surprised, even very young children, you can communicate to them. Hey, you know, like I know this is strange, this feels uncomfortable, but we're in this together. Here's what we can do. So from very young children to older children, it is really important to communicate in a way that they understand that you're there with them and that you have some expectations and some norms. So what we want to start off with is, what are the things that you would like to see, that you have to see by the end of the day or by the end of a week? So this might be different for different age groups or for different children, even in your own family, right? What are the non-negotiables? So for me, for example, I think about non-negotiables as if you have siblings, not beating up your siblings would be a non-negotiable, right? For even younger kids, it might be don't pull the dog's ears. That might be non-negotiable. For older siblings, it might be, for example, for my teen, it would be no Grey's Anatomy during the weekday. That is a non-negotiable. So you think about, according to your age group and your child, what are those things that are not negotiable? And then also think about, where do you have flexibility? This is for your back pocket, right? Like, think about it, where do I also have some flexibility that I'd be willing to move these things around, right? So this way you have some room where you know these things I'm fixed on, these ones, not budging. And then think about rewards and consequences, right? And I learned earlier on that it's really useful to actually talk about rewards and consequences with your child and actually have a conversation when you're giving them choice. Now, it doesn't mean that the whole world is a choice. So for example, if you were to give any child an option that is completely wide open about what should the consequence be? Well, I get a kiss from you? That would be the consequence. So if you think about it, give them choices. So would you rather have, in Aliza's example, less time with Enid Blyton, reading, less time, or less time with sports. So depending on what your child's interest is, you give them those 2 or 3 options. As your child is older, as my daughter started to be a teenager, I would then actually give her wider choice and say, okay, tell me what the consequence is, and we're going to talk about and discuss what the consequence if this doesn't happen, right? So it depends on the age of the child. Similarly for rewards, would you rather get a sticker for a younger child? Would you rather get a sticker on the sheet that we've developed together for going through our checklist? Or would you rather get a treat at the end of the day? So it can be those 2 options. And again, we're trying to build in some choice and some agency. Aliza mentioned earlier, it's really important to get your kids to be self-directed, because if they are to be lifelong learners like Hazramam wants us to be, or if they are to continue to be resilient to all the changes coming their way, they've got to be self-guided, and it starts pretty young. So what are some of these guiding principles that we can talk about when it comes to setting expectations? I'd start with, we are in a pandemic. And so that's kind of a non-negotiable, right? You're going to wear your mask. You're going to stay 6 feet distance. Those are my plain, straight up non-negotiables, but also a little bit of compassion. This is difficult for everybody, right? So I might have said you're going to finish X, Y, and Z by the end of the week, but you know what? My daughter's had a really rough week, and I'm going to cut you a break, and I'm going to cut myself a break if the living room is a mess and my kitchen is a disaster, because guess what? I've got too much going on, right? So having that self-compassion, but also thinking about your child and what they're going through right now. Setting very clear expectations. This is what I expect, and talking about it. These are the things that we expect as a family. And then we talked about this briefly. Let the child lead and be flexible. And what we mean by lead is really think about what your child's interests are, how your child is feeling, what kind of structure and flexibility they need. There are some children that need a lot of structure. There are some children who do better with a little less structure. Very young children usually do better with more structure, right? So really think about who your child is, who your children are, and where they're at, and what would work for them. Involve children in household activities. You don't have to do this alone. Moms, I'm talking to you. Everybody should be pitching in, and dads, I'm talking to you too. But your children can also very early on pitch in, and it's a way of learning, right? It's a way of getting self-sufficient. Can I take the garbage out? Can I load the dishwasher? Whatever it is. And then be consistent. So once you've decided those rewards and you've decided those consequences, you've got to follow through. Right? So if that was going to be the reward and you agreed on it, that better be the reward. It doesn't matter whether you're going to have to go and buy the treat that you promised, but you're going to have to do that because they're not going to trust you next time, right? If it doesn't happen. Same thing for the consequence. If the consequence is not put in place, you lose that trust, and the kid's like, you know, I can get away with this. It doesn't matter. There's really not going to be any consequence. So I think those are the guiding principles as you think about creating this structure. And then the last couple of points on this is co-create that structure. So don't do it to your children, do it with your children. Don't do it to your family, do it with your family, right? So if there are multiple people living in the house, sit down, talk about, here's what we're gonna do tomorrow. Here's how we're gonna, these are the kind of broad things that we would like to achieve. Account for the fact that you might be working, that everybody's working. Account for the fact that there might be some live class time and there might be some time that is independent work. How are you going to fit that into your schedule? When are you going to check in with your kids? What are they going to be doing when there's no live class going on? How are they going to, you know, how is that day going to be structured? And what are their incentives, i.e. the rewards, the treat, or whatever it is, and the consequences of not following that structure while you're trying to work, right? So again, the more choice here that you can give to your children, the better. And then lastly, when they do well, one of the ways of motivating them, we're in rough times and everybody's going through, you know, kids are having to perhaps be independent for the first time, right? Like normally in schools, they're very guided. The structure is all there. Everybody, they don't have to think, there's no question of, I'm not going to class, at least for the younger kids, right? So how do you reinforce, how do you motivate? There's a lot of research showing that in order to have a really positive effect, positive outcome, have a ratio of praise 5 times and criticize once. And criticize also, I would do it in a more positive manner. I'm not sure criticize is the right word, but 5 times, this is amazing, you are great, oh my God, you made such a great, someone said they do a lot of art. Nida said, you know, she's doing a lot of art activities. So put that up, display it. That's positive reinforcement. My work is good enough. I did a good job. It's right up there on the fridge for everybody to see, right? And compliment the behavior, not the person. So, and that leads back to that concept of growth mindset. So every time, it's not that you are great, but you worked really hard. That was a really good painting. You put in a lot of time to complete that math work. I am proud of you, right? So it's really tells your child they can change their behavior. There's something here that they can change to get that positive reinforcement for you. And that's really growth mindset. It's thinking about your brain as something malleable that can be changed. You can achieve a lot if you think like that. So in the same way, focus on your child's ability to pursue goals and their commitment to learning. Oh, that was great. You set a goal. You said you were going to finish reading this book by the end of the day, and you did. That's amazing. You said you would learn a little bit more about dolphins, and there you go. Here's my presentation, right? So focus on their ability to pursue their goals rather than just on, oh, you know, they didn't finish whatever content you thought they should have covered. So think about the broader picture here and step back a little bit. And again, we're harping on this, get to know your child's interests and use that to do the positive reinforcement that we're talking about. And then last point here is provide opportunities to master skills related to your child's strengths, right? So every opportunity, if you see that your child is a good artist, Nida, I would say every opportunity that you can give to your child to do and practice that art and learn a little bit more, you're building on their strengths. And that's the other reason why we also say explore extracurriculars, right? Right now, not a lot of us can do that, but when you can, explore the strengths so you can build them and master them. Failure, this quote, I really like this quote at the bottom, and I put this here because we often think, oh my God, you know, my child's failed math, or they've, you know, failed English, or they got like, you know, 7 on 10. I used to get in trouble for getting 7 on 10. Sorry, Dad. But, you know, or 8 on 10 on math. It was like, oh my God, end of the world. This is not a good idea. But that taught me, failure teaches you, okay, if you can say, what can I learn from this? Every time, if you can step back and reflect and say, what can I learn from this failure? Then you can next time do even better. But if you're going to say, oh my God, I failed, this is the end of the world, you can just quit and go home, and we wouldn't have resilient adults and we wouldn't have resilient children, right? So when you think about your child's ability to pursue goals, to pursue a commitment to learning, when you focus on that, failure becomes part of the process, right? And that's really important message to convey to our children and to ourselves. Okay, so that was the end of my section for now. And Munira is, now that we framed this in social emotional health and thinking about some broad ways in how to think about structure and flexibility, Munira is going to talk about really the do's, like how can we enable the structure, how can we create a physical environment. Over to you, Munira.
Thank you, Chairman Noreen. Okay, so now we have seen so far all the principles of what we can do, we should be doing, but now let's look at the how. How can we do it? What do we need to do? What's in our control? The pandemic is not in our control. So what is in our control? The physical environment. So let's see how can we control the physical environment. So the physical environment firstly can be controlled by having a routine in your home. And a successful routine starts from the morning, and the morning begins from you. So the morning routine, if you want it to be successful, it starts from you. So what does that mean? So that means that you have to be up, you have to be dressed, have your coffee or chai, and even before your kids wake up. So what does that do? So I know that's the most difficult thing to do, especially if you have nowhere to go, you have no meetings to attend, you have to stay at home. Why should we get dressed up? So when you do that, that sets up So set your mind free and you're ready to take on to the day. Like you're all set, bring it on. If there are any frustrations or any battles that are going to happen later on in the day, you're ready for it. Plus, when your kids wake up, they see you all dressed up. So you set the tone for the day. They see that, okay, it's not a summer vacation day, it's a school day, working day, my parents are ready, I have to be ready too. So they follow your lead. You are their example, their role model. So that's why you play a very crucial role in setting up a successful routine. Also, a successful morning routine depends on a successful bedtime routine. So that means having a consistent bedtime routine for your kids. And also having the same time is also very important, because if one day you negotiate, okay, let's go to sleep at 8, okay, you're watching your favorite show, 8:10, 8:15. So then every night becomes negotiable. Then the kids are like, okay, there is no set bedtime, I can negotiate the bedtime. But you have to be consistent. It has to be the same. Yes, of course, there needs to be a little flexibility too. If some days you have some family over and you all are celebrating, it's okay. Those are the exceptions. But again, you try to be consistent with the bedtime, especially for younger kids. And then you might ask, what about the weekends? I would say have the same bedtime and wake up time for weekends as well. Young kids' bodies don't know the difference between a Tuesday night and a Sunday night. They don't know it's a weekend, so I can sleep later. So they don't know the difference. For teenagers, it's a little different. But for young kids, they need to be having a consistent bedtime routine throughout the week. And next, have the kids dress up, even if it's remote learning or they're attending in person. That sets up the tone. So that gives them a boost, and it also boosts up their productivity. I'm dressed, I'm ready, bring it on. One more thing that helps all the kids is having like a checklist or a schedule. For younger kids, a visual schedule helps. Older kids, they can have the written schedule, that would also work. But for younger kids, you can also have a checklist on a clipboard. That's a hit among young kids. They love to take charge over their own schedule. Okay, I did this, I woke up, I brushed my teeth, I made my bed, it's time for breakfast, I did breakfast. Now I'm ready to join into Zoom class. So having a schedule with words and pictures, research says that kids as young as 3.5-year-olds are able to follow schedules based on pictures and words without your help. So the kids are capable of doing it, but they need some support by you giving them a visual schedule. Also, if it's a completely new routine, as discussed earlier, we need to communicate. We need to talk about it. Let's set some concrete steps. And what would help the younger kids is that you can role play that. Let's role play our new routine. What will our day look like? And having a two-way role play, like let the kids be the parents. They would love that. And you can be the kids and you can role play how they act. So that's amazing opportunity, and play is very critical during early years. And that's a great teaching opportunity for you guys. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of a visual schedule. You can personalize it according to your child. You can put your child's pictures, like child eating, your child on the computer. That would personalize it and the kids would love it more. You can place it in their room or a shared space. So visual schedule helps. Again, this is more for younger kids. For older kids, a simple schedule just with times and what they have to do would do too. Next. So now that the schedule is in place, what do we need to do next? Don't give up. Like it's a day or two, oh my God, it's not working, I give up. Don't give up. You need to be consistent. Even when we have to make a new habit, we have to do it for at least 10 to 20 days, a week to 20 days. Don't give up so soon. You have to be consistent with the routine. Once you are consistent, the kids will get a hang of it, the kids will get used to it, and eventually your days will be much smoother. So, and if you promise any consequences and rewards, be consistent with them. So as Chairman Noreen mentioned, even if it's not available, you have to go and buy it, go buy it, but fulfill your promises. You have to be consistent. So what else can we do to have a successful environment? So let's look at some scenarios and troubleshoot through them. For example, if you have multiple siblings, multiple children at home, and all of them have school going on, and they share a space and they are doing their schoolwork. So eventually one of them are early finishers and some of them are still doing their work. So that's a non-negotiable, again, as discussed earlier, that whoever is doing the schoolwork will get the room, and the other one you can engage them in another task. If it's a younger child, they can engage in a non-loud activity. For example, no watching TV during school hours. After everybody's done with their school, you can go and watch TV and play loud music. But while school is going on, you cannot. And if a child finishes early, so you can give them options. You can go read a book, you can go outside and play, you can go for a walk, you can play with your pet. So you can give them some choices. If the kids are way younger and you don't want them to disturb their older siblings while they're in school, class, virtually, you can keep a set of separate, very excitable toys that they love playing with, that these toys are only while your sister or brother is in school. So you can only play with these toys while your sister is attending school. So that's a set rule for school hours. So if you have siblings, so everybody's working on homework, school time is over now, they still have homework. So elder siblings can help the younger siblings, or you can have designated spots. Okay, so if your sister is working in the room, you can work with me on the dining table. Or if everybody's working on the dining table, sometimes younger siblings look up to their older siblings. Oh, my sister is working, and they try to imitate. So if whatever works for your child, if your child learns from imitation, so you sharing the space might be helpful. But if otherwise, for example, if you have everybody needs to work on the dining table or on the kitchen table or in the same room, so maybe you can just go to the dollar store and get those visual trifold, and that's like your space to work, and that way nobody will disturb each other. And so these are certain rules during school hours. Okay, now 3 p.m., 4 p.m., school's over. What next? So try to make sure that the school hours are different from the non-school hours. So after non-school hours, they can engage in activities that they cannot engage in school hours. For example, now you can watch TV, you can play loud music. And especially weekends. So make sure the school days do not look like the weekends. Weekends are different. So you do different activities over the weekends. You go out, you have like a family night, game night, you play board games together, or you all go to the park together on a walk. So make sure things on weekend are different from, so that the kids don't get bored and like all the days are the same. Doesn't matter. You have to differentiate the days from the school days, then weekends and after school hours. And having to reset and refresh, that's also very important, because everybody needs a break. Everybody cannot stay on screen all the time. It's tiring. It's very tiring, even for adults. We need a break, so do the kids. So for younger kids, providing frequent movement breaks. For older kids, again, having like, okay, today is no screen time day, or one weekend, choose a day like no screen time today. We will all do activities outside, go maybe go to the beach, again, keeping in mind all the COVID guidelines. So yeah, it's very important that you do a reset every once in a while. Also, you have to make sure that your environment is a no excuse school environment, so that your kids cannot give any excuses. Okay, my younger sister was making so much noise, I couldn't do my homework. So make sure your kids aren't able to give you that excuse, because you have already prepared for it. So that's why thinking ahead of these things are the situations that can come or arise in your house. So planning beforehand, setting expectations, setting up the rules, what are the negotiables, what are the non-negotiables. Again, it will vary from house to house, child to child, for everyone. So it's not the same for everyone. Next.
So if I could just quickly just chime in on that, I think it's also really important, Mira raised the point about how can you change things up on weekends? And one of the problems with being virtual all the time and being at home for the most part, for those of us who haven't yet gone back to work face to face, is that there's a monotony. I don't know about you guys, but it's just, it's like, oh my God, am I staring at the same wall? Am I sitting on the same couch 24/7? It can get a lot. And that monotony and that kind of feeling of frustration and boredom can then, you know, seep into your work day where you're like, I don't want to do anything. And I think we've all been there, even as adults. So think about your children as well, right? It's the same screen, that change in visual, that change in environment, that change in, you know, for us in New York City, it's like going up and down the subway stairs. You know, at least it was an automatic workout, you know. So none of that is happening right now. How can you change that up on the weekends? And it relates to an enabling environment, because unless your children have a chance to reset, it's very difficult to go back into the work week with kind of the same things without any sort of visual changes or changes in environment on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, again, I'll take the example of our family. You know, I noticed a couple of months ago that we're just all just kind of really going down and just really like, oh my God, this is just too much. It's really, there's nothing to look forward to. And my daughter is a rising senior. She's like, oh my God, I don't know if I'll have a senior year. You know, I don't know if I'll be able to graduate. There's so much, you know, anxiety and concern about what's going to happen in the future. So I was like, okay, we need something to look forward to. So we set up, okay, we're going to go do a picnic in the park. We're going to go walk around to a different side of the neighborhood. Whatever it is that you can do that's different, that resets. And for younger children, it might be, you know, can I do, I don't know, some way to get them out or to do something different. I think that's the key point, because if you help them reset, it will actually motivate them to be refreshed and come back to an environment where it's a little bit more monotonous during the day. Okay.
So setting up a designated workspace. So as all of you were mentioning in the beginning, you all are doing most of these things already. And to be honest, you are already setting up your child for a successful school year. These are all amazing things that need to be done. So just a conscious reinforcer. So make sure you have a hard flat surface so that the kids can keep their devices on. The devices are charged. You have a seating for your child. There's a place to keep all the supplies, and it's a quiet area, and make sure the space is not too bright or too dark. Eliminate all the distractions, turn off the TV, check-in times. Okay, so identify check-in times with your family and kids. So for example, if you're working from your work and you're not at home, so you can identify at what time does my child get breaks, so I can check in with my child at that time. Or if you have older siblings in the house, older kids, they can always check in with the younger ones. Okay, do you need any help with homework? Did you finish this? That way they are also learning to take responsibility. And also monitor the pets and siblings. Again, older siblings can help in this. Responsibility, assign tasks to all the family members. Okay, you have break from this time to this time. Okay, you are taking care of the dog during that time. Then it will be my turn because I have my break then, and you can do your school at that time. So have a schedule, assign responsibilities. The kids are learning so many things by that. Next, please. Okay, so supplies. So most schools are providing hardware and like devices and supporting with Wi-Fi. So the best way would be for you to reach out to your school if you want to find out about supplies. And then if anything else, you can always reach out to the Access Hotline. That is 1-844-552-2237. So we are always here to help.
So let's shift gears a little bit. And before I do that, I just want to say that we know you're sending in a lot of questions. We're taking note of it, and we have a few more slides to go, and then we'll dedicate the last half hour or so to answer your questions. So we appreciate your patience there. So here's an interesting fact from research. Undergrads and graduate students can only focus in person for 13 to 17 minutes at a stretch. That's in person for undergrads and graduate students, which means your attention span goes down when you move to online, and it's even less for younger kids. So pre-K to a kinder kid can only focus for 3 to 5 minutes tops on a great day at length on a focused activity, right? Keep that in mind when you're working with your children. Don't be afraid to take breaks. Don't be afraid to cut up the work into different chunks. And then also get a little creative. So the next few slides are going to help you think about how to make learning fun at home with your children. So let's start off with how content is processed, right? I have a colleague whose daughter loves being read to. The colleague works from home. She doesn't have time to read to her daughter for that long. She uses audiobooks, right? So the daughter is still getting the reading and someone is reading to her, but it's not the parent who's doing it. Chair Nori talked about this at the start. Don't feel like you have to do everything. There are ways to get the same lessons learned. You just have to get a little creative about it. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Next slide, please. So here are some tips to make learning fun, right? So for younger children, when they're in pre-K, kinder, first grade, they're learning all these socio-emotional skills. They're learning how to be members of society. So some things that they learn are turn taking and having patience. How are they going to learn that at home? Board games are a great way. They learn to take turns, they learn patience, they learn, to go around in a circle and wait for everyone to contribute. You're thinking about counting and you're thinking about letter recognition. Have them count the food on their plate. If you take a drive, have them recognize letters on a billboard. You're making the same learning happen, but you're doing it in differentiated ways, especially because you know that expecting a young child to sit on Zoom for 4 to 6 hours is unreasonable. And there are ideas for older kids as well. So everyone's discovering new recipes. Everyone was into making banana bread and dalgona coffee or whatever it's called. Have them do that. Have them create recipes for you. Set fitness goals. Everyone's trying to do the 30-day yoga challenge, for example. Bring that in. Do it as a family. And then, like Chair Noreen said, and we keep harping on this, but it's important, have them be involved in what their day looks like. So have them set up the rewards, the consequences. That way they're more invested because they know that if they do well, whatever they get at the end is something that they really care deeply about. Next slide, please. You are not trying to replicate school at home, right? We think that a kid goes to school and for 4 or 5 hours, they're just learning. Even that's not even happening in school. So, in classrooms, they're broken up in groups, they go to stations, and then during the day, they have music class, they have gym, they have PE, they have their electives, they have lunch. Even the school day is broken up. And we're not even trying to replicate school at home because that's an impossible task. What we are trying to do is supplement and complement the academic learning with these other holistic skills that are automatically learned in schools by virtue of being around so many people. So we're trying to help them problem solve and communicate and develop resilience and focus on their values and ethics and mental and physical health. So, we talked about this reading thing, the audiobooks. Another thing to do is have the older siblings read to the younger children or have the younger ones lead to the older ones. They grow more confident in reading, they get better at letter recognition. For the older kids, people are getting very creative with projects. So again, a colleague of mine was talking about how her teenage boys are really interested in Hamilton. So every night they listen to the Hamilton musical, they memorize the lyrics, and then they dive into the history behind the lyrics. So they're learning, but they're also having a lot of fun. We're hearing a lot from people saying that, their kids are losing out on social time. And when you think social time, you're like, well, okay, am I gonna ask my kid to do some more FaceTime? That's more screen time. Social time can look different, right? You can write letters and get them invested in mailing letters and receiving letters. I have one of my cousins drove by her friend's house and wrote with chalk on the sidewalk as a way to communicate with a friend because, we're trying to social distance. Really try to capitalize on family time, right? So board games is one way, but if you want to incorporate exercise, you can take family walks together, you can prep meals together, you can go biking together. Chair Noreen talked about this. Have them be involved in the chores, right? It doesn't have to be your job to look after the pet and to take care of the plants and do laundry and the dishes. Have them take ownership of the house. They are part of this living environment. And then finally, and probably most importantly, we all really value service, right? That's part of how we grow as a community. Have them be involved in service. Have them read to their younger children. Have them do babysitting online. Have them play chess with elders in elderly homes. Think about, do food drives, right? I have a work colleague whose daughter wanted to do a food drive. So she went and she dropped cans of foods in a high need neighborhood outside people's doors. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can have them develop all these skills. You just have to be a little creative. And again, you don't have to be creative alone. Your children can help you in that creativity. I'll turn it back to Chair Noreen to finish us up.
Thank you, Lisa. So wrapping this up in the next few slides, how can you motivate your child? We'll come back to what we started off with, and that is talk about it. Talk about how your day went. Talk about how people are feeling. Talk about how your children, what your children liked. I once walked into, I by the way, put a picnic table out in my living room so my child wouldn't have to sit in her tiny bedroom with a desk all day long. I said, no, we're gonna bring you out to the living room. And so one day I walked past in the middle of meetings, in between meetings, and I saw that on her screen, nobody had their cameras on, not even the teacher, right? So blank screen, teacher is not, just her name is showing, and not one child in the class had their camera on. And there's a lecture going. So there's slides up and there's this, droning, monotonous lecture going. And so once she was done, I said, Frida, how did that feel? That looked very strange to me. Even your teacher had the camera on. So this is how it is. This teacher just puts the slides on and we don't have a choice, but we have to really listen to her because she grades us on this stuff. So just talking about that, it gives her an opportunity to acknowledge that was painful. It gives me an opportunity to understand what's happening in her classroom. And so really it gets her a little bit motivated. I'm like, okay, so what can you do to make it interesting? Like, what are kinds of questions that you could put in the chat? Is there something that you could, that is working? That is also an opportunity to reframe. Is there something in this class that is working? There may not be every time, but sometimes, you gotta look for it. Continue to establish that structure and routine. And again, back to that positive reinforcement, right? You worked really hard. I love that you set goals and that you stuck to them. I like this idea of continuing some routines. So back to school shopping, I was walking in my neighborhood the other day and there's a Gap store and there was a long line. And I was like, wait, I don't understand. Why are people going to the Gap store? And then I saw, oh, they're all kids and they're going to back to school shopping. And it had not occurred to me because there's no back to school. It's kind of virtual for us right now, but it's a routine that also is motivating. Oh, I'm going to get something new. I can get a new outfit for back to school. This is fun. And then we talked about try different ways to reset on the weekend. Lead by example, right? If you're going to talk about your feelings, your child will be motivated to talk about their feelings. If you're going to say, hey, I'm going to really try and reframe. I'm feeling frustrated. I have all these chores. I have work. I have my children. I'm feeling really frustrated, but I'm going to try and see what is good about this, or how can I work with my family to make this work better? You're leading by example. Every time you do that, you're setting an example for your child. This is how it's done. And then lastly, follow your child's lead, and their interests. Think about very carefully, what is it that they like to do? What is it that they enjoy doing? How do they learn best, right? Do they like, Aliza said, some children like to be read to, some children don't, right? So just try to figure out what is working, what is not working, and really follow their lead on that. Doesn't mean you give them full freedom to do anything that they want. It just means that you're capitalizing and building on their strengths. So the last thing we would say here is it takes a village. There is a reason that we say that. Most of us have lost our extended families. Right now, we can't draw on our friends because COVID. And it feels like we're isolated, but there are ways to reach out, right? So the first thing is you are your child's best advocate. Make sure that you know your child's teacher, their phone number. It might be a new school year, you've never met them. Find that email address. If they are available on whatever learning management platform they're using, use that. Google Classrooms, whatever it is that your school is using. Talk to, if needed, and if you're finding that your children's teacher is not responsive, reach out to other people in the school. Are there other teachers you can talk to? Is there a counselor you can talk to? If your child has special needs, definitely make an appointment and find out, what can you do to help my child? How can we work together to make this happen? Talk to other parents, right? You cannot go visit them and have a cup of chai with them in their home, but you can definitely do a virtual cup of chai, right? Hey, talk to me, like, how are you doing this? I know of a parent who decided to set up a virtual social hangout with parents and with the kids, and they take turns doing that so that one parent is minding all of the other kids virtually and they're playing, they're kind of having a virtual play date, and the other parents get time off. That's your village, right? You've got to draw on that village. And then reach out to us. Every time you call Access, you can call them and you can say, hey, I'm in this region. This is the kind of help they need. Immediately they will contact us. We get to know, we immediately follow up on it, and we'll call you back and we'll talk to you, right? So you're not alone in this. Find your village, make sure that you're in touch with all of those pieces in your environment that can help you get through this, which is a difficult time. If you are going out and if your kids are going out, a reminder for social distancing, keep your masks on. The pandemic is still very, very real. And as we wrap up, when we send these, we'll post these slides, we'll post the deck. We've also been recording. You will get all of these links. So there's a lot of resources out there for you to draw on. And lastly, a reminder here, are you registered to vote? If not, there's a link. Okay, with that, we're going to end and open up to your questions. Over to you, Anita.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Those were incredible tips and great pro tips. I think we can all start using them tomorrow when school's back in session. So I know I would be implementing some of those. We have had a lot of questions come in, so we will try to address as many as possible. Some have similar themes, so I'll try to do it in groups and summarize it that way. But if you have other questions, there's a Q&A box and there's a chat box. I'll try to catch your question in between. Otherwise, we'll be on for a few minutes and you can reach out to us there. So a lot of parents are wondering, with all this virtual learning, how do we manage kids' online routines if both parents are busy with their work and the kids are getting easily distracted with the internet right there next to them? They start doing other things like watching YouTube or Netflix or playing online games, or right after they're done with school, they want to play video games, and there's this whole power struggle with screen time. So any thoughts on that from our experts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all of us are facing this, right? No matter how old your child is. I have a teenager, same problem, right? In my case, it's Grey's Anatomy, that's the problem. In your case, it might be, gaming. What is the consequence? What have you negotiated in advance, and how do you follow through on it? I know it's hard because it can also be an everyday battle, right? Every single day you're talking about screen time, every single day. So if you were to step back for a second and think about, how can I avoid talking about this every single day? Well, you can do it by negotiating that right at the beginning. What is the consequence for this happening? And what is the reward? Think about that 5-to-1 ratio. You want to do more rewards than consequence. What is the reward for not doing this? What's the reward for not getting onto Grey's Anatomy or gaming when you're not supposed to? If you've talked about that in advance, it is so much easier to follow through either on a reward or a consequence. And you'll find that if you keep following through, eventually your child's like, actually, there's no way around this. I am either going to get in trouble or I won't get the treats that I want to. So it is started off and set that tone earlier on. The school year is just starting. It's a great opportunity to kind of reset any things that you want to do at the start of the semester.
Great, thanks for answering that, Dr. Noreen. Another question that's come up a few times is, how do you help your children feel that it's okay to go to school in person if virtual learning is actually available to them? And it's not an option for you as a parent.
Just communicating again is very important. Communicating your fears, and make the kids realize what role they are playing. They need to have a purpose that, okay, like they need, you are playing a very important role by keeping others safe by being at home and putting on a mask, following all the guidelines. So we are being extra careful by staying home. So we are being extra cautious. So you can also communicate your fears that right now I'm not comfortable sending you to school in a large group because I don't want you to get sick. So I care for you. So I would feel more comfortable if you run from home. So communicating with the kids is very important.
So the other thing that really works is a pro-con list, right? So there are two things that you want to tie together here. One is that you are making decisions that are best for your family. So Chair Noreen said this at the start, it's not what that person is doing and what that person is doing. What's working for us as a family? And include the children in the discussion, right? Don't just make a decision for them. Talk them through how you came about making that decision. And if the decision was already made for you, then that's sort of an easy thing, right? It's out of your control, you just have to do it. But if you tell them, look, this is what I prioritize, this is what I think matters to our family, and have them articulate what matters to them, I think when they feel like they're part of the decision, they'll come around to accept it a little more easily.
And I think also it's important, you know, if your child is, try to understand why that your child is asking that question. What is the root of the problem, right? So if you're, for example, saying, hey, it's okay for you to go to school, right? If that's the situation, your child's nervous, you've looked at it and you are comfortable sending your child to school because a lot of schools have great procedures in place. They've done the timing, they've done the physical distancing and so on. So you're comfortable, you're like, this is right for my child. It makes sense for me, right? Talk to your child about what their fears are. In either going back to school or staying at home, and try to understand them and then walk them through, as Eliza said, why is it okay? Why you have the same fear, so you could acknowledge, hey, you know, I understand it's scary, acknowledge their feeling, but also say, here's what I was thinking about. Here are the things that they've put into place to make you feel safe. Or if they're staying at home, here are the things, here are the reasons where I think this is a good idea. Let's talk about what are the things that we can do to make this a good experience.
Great responses. Thank you so much for that insight. Another question that's come up, Nadeem asks, it starts pretty young with when we said it starts pretty young with virtual learning and rewards and consequences. He was wondering how you would recommend discussing rewards and consequences with really young children, and how young do you think would be the earliest you can start talking about this?
So for young kids, again, the reward and the consequences will vary by age. So for example, if you have very young kids, for them the rewards will be very different for an older kid. For example, so when you finish reading a book with me, then we go outside and play. So that's the reward that the child is getting for reading a book with the parent together. Or so it varies for the child. So you can, it also depends on the motivation of the kid. How motivating is the reward for the child? So you have to choose something like, okay, after you finish lunch, you can get to play with your favorite blocks. So that's very motivating for the child. So that's the consequences leading to the child has to finish their lunch or dinner, and then the child can play with the blocks. So again, young childs do understand it, but you have to be consistent and explicitly mention, be clear, give them the steps, the concrete. If you do this, then you get this. So first this, then this. When you do this, then you get that. So you have to be very clear with the kids, and it depends the rewards and the consequences according to age.
Great, thank you, Munira. Another parent, Rosina, asked us, what should her realistic expectations be about allowing her child to work independently if they're just in 2nd or 3rd grade? How much independent work can they actually be doing?
So independent work is not just reading, writing. Independent work also involves play. If the child is playing independently, that is also independent work. If the child is making a drawing or doing some creative work, that is also independent work. It doesn't have to be academic. So, and how much individual work? So it depends on the schedule that you've made for the child. If you are available and you have some free schedule, so you can always provide some quality time with your child and you both can work together on some projects. But again, if you're working, if you're not free from 9 to 5, so then obviously you'll have to schedule your child's schedule in a way that the child has to work and then give them breaks in between. And also if there's another sibling at home, so they can schedule a time that you can play with this your sibling at this time, she's free at this time. So again, it depends from home to home what your schedule is. What, and independent work doesn't have to be academic. It can be reading, it can be dramatic play, just role playing, playing a game with a sibling. Those are all independent. You are not involved in it.
So I had a friend who had an hour meeting at 6 p.m. and she has 2 twin 7-year-old boys. So she told them, write a storybook for me. And then once you're done, we will read the story to each other like you are authors. So she set up this whole author's corner. And her boys cannot write complete sentences, but they can draw. And so they drew all these pictures of monsters and trucks and then stapled a few pages together and then got really proud of sharing their story and occupied the whole hour, right? So it's still creative thinking. They are trying to form letters. They are trying to form a cohesive story and they're narrating it. That can still be independent work, even if they're not sitting staring at a teacher on Zoom.
I'll give it completely, you know, it sounds like it's not an educational activity. But I remember when my daughter was about 5, and I would take her to a restaurant. She's already had her meal, right? So now she wants attention and I just want time out, right? It's like, I would love to have an adult meal, an adult conversation. Thank you very much. And I would give her a piece of paper and a pen and I'd say, okay, can you go around the restaurant? And I always have to be able to see her. Can you go around the restaurant and count for me the number of white napkins on each table and then just add them up? Okay, done? Oh, fantastic. She'll come like, okay, there are this many napkins. All right, can you now go around and count the number of lamps that there are? It sounds ridiculous, but what we're doing is thinking about learning in a different way and thinking about independent work. That is also independent work, right? So thinking about independent work in a very different way. And the other thing I would say on this is also think about attention span. She can do this for 5 minutes, 6 minutes. At that age, it was about 5 to 6 minutes where she'd be interested enough to say, okay, how many napkins can I count, around the table? Then she's bored. You've got to have to come up with something else. So if you chunk up and think about attention span and chunk it up and mix it up. So can they do art and drawing for 5 minutes? Can they then switch? All right, now we're going to move over. You know how in early childhood classrooms, they move over to different corners. Move over, think about the different activities. All of that is independent work. Now I'm going to go and change my clothes, or now I'm going to go and have a snack. Those are all independent activities. If you've laid out the snack, they can certainly go and reach for it and have their snack. So just think about it much more broader and think about it in terms of chunking and concentration span.
Thank you so much. We still have a few questions to go through. I think we're going to hang out for another 10 minutes. So if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box or use the Q&A feature and we'll try to address it. It seems like we still have over 100 people on this call. So it seems like a lot of you have young kids and about young elementary school kids. So we have a few families here with ECD beginner level, specifically 3-year-olds. And then they have an older sibling. And so I'm just going to merge these two questions. One is, how do we engage an ECDC beginner level child, a 3-year-old, in virtual learning if they are enrolled in virtual learning? And the other question is, how do you make your 3-year-old understand that their sister is attending virtual school when maybe they're not attending virtual school? So whoever wants to take that with the 3-year-olds.
So for a 3-year-old, we will need an adult for them to engage. So I myself, being a preschool teacher, when I do virtual classes, my expectation is that there is an adult next to the child. So even in beginner level and in ECDC, there's a rule that the parent has to be there with the child. So when you are there engaging, when you're excited, your emotions are translated into the child, and automatically the child will eventually engage. And yes, it's a beginner level. It's something new for the child. Even if it was in person, it takes a while for the child to get used to that new schedule, new routine, because a 3-year-old is not used to sitting in one place for such a long time. So this is something very new. So like virtually sitting in 30 minutes, maybe if you feel that your child is getting very fidgety, give them a movement break. Sometimes having the child on tummy time helps, like having the laptop on the floor and the child being on the tummy, that increases their attention span, because young kids cannot sit for that long. So they're always fidgeting and moving around. And so tummy time helps to strengthen their core muscles too. So, and keeps them engaged for longer. And yes, movement breaks and provide them some motivation. If you are there, that's the biggest motivation from there, that, okay, my mom and dad are there with me to attend the class. That's a really big motivation for them. And try to eliminate visual distractions from around. Again, all the reminders, like, okay, set designated spot. There are distractions, because young kids get easily distracted. So you have to make sure there's nothing around that they get extra distracted. And yeah, so virtual classes ideally will be for their age level. So it will be shorter, not that long. And they will give them movement breaks. So that's the teacher's responsibility to do that. So, and I'm not saying that they will get used to it right away. It will take time for them to get a hang of the new routine, but you will be a big supportive player in this.
The other thing that I want to add here is, don't be hard on yourself if it doesn't go well, right? So I have a colleague, and I'll give you a little bit of his background. He's an education faculty member at Harvard, right? So this is his bread and butter, and he's at one of the best institutions of education in the country. He tweeted that his 4-year-old started her Zoom class. She was on mute. So she yelled at the screen for a couple of seconds, didn't realize that she's on mute, took her headphones, they were the big headphones, turned it around so that it made a beard, laughed at herself because she had created a beard, threw the headphones and walked away. And he was like, well, I guess that's learning for today. Great. So that's just to say, I know that as parents, we're really, really stressed about this, but cut yourself some slack. Like Munira said, come back and try again tomorrow. It'll take time, it'll take consistency, but if days don't go the way they're planned, practice self-compassion. It's okay. It's the school's job to catch them up. You just have to help them be healthy and happy.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we have some interesting questions coming in about psychology and failure and motivation. So I did want to touch on these because I'm starting to see several of them. Just gonna throw them out there and you guys can kind of address them holistically or individually. Asmina's asking, how do you motivate an only child? Her son does really well in in-person school because his classmates are around and he gets motivated watching them, but in-home learning poses a challenge since there's no one around for him. Hamida's asking, how do you help a 3rd grader feel like it's okay when they don't get things right the first time because they're starting to feel overcoming those feelings of failure? And then had one more, but the one that comes to mind that I didn't put down here is, what about those kids that want the reward before having to do the work and motivating them by withholding the reward till after they do it? So any of those, again, that's overcoming the fear of failure, getting motivated if you're an only child or in separate rooms even, and managing the reward system a little bit.
So I can take the failure one and then I'll let my other 2 panelists take the rewards and motivation one. So one, AKEB Northeast's website actually has a webinar on growth mindset. So if you have some time, you should go check that out. But the idea behind growth mindset, which I think is critical here, is the understanding and acceptance that every failure is a learning opportunity. So there's some research that's been done that shows that the best thing for a person's learning is when they make mistakes. Because when you make a mistake, your brain starts to think about why you got something wrong. or you can work with your child to understand how they can do better. And so you're engaging brain muscles that wouldn't otherwise be engaged when you get something right. When you get something right, you're like, okay, cool, I know I'm good at this, I'm going to move on. But when you're not succeeding at something, your brain is actually working in ways to figure out why you're not succeeding. And in that, you're helping your brain to develop in really important ways. So that's one thing from the psychology side. The failure side of this is practicing a growth mindset means that you can get better at something, right? It takes practice, it takes consistency, but you will get better at it. So think about anything that we start, right? When, as a child, I started playing the piano, the first couple of days I was like, boom, 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 okay, I don't know how to play the piano, right? It takes months, years to get better at an instrument. People say things like, oh, this person was born with a math ability. That's incorrect. No one's born with an ability. You practice and hone and develop the ability. And so you want to have these conversations with your child where you get them excited about making mistakes, because that's how they learn. And you don't use the word failure as a bad thing. You use the word failure as a way to understand how to get better at something.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And I think similarly, thinking about motivation and how to motivate an only child. I also have an only child. I wasn't an only child, but I have one child. If your child is social, so what it sounds to me like from the question is that it was easy to motivate your child when they went to school because, you know, everybody else is doing well. And so there's this feeling of I'm in this together and I, you know, have a peer group. My recommendation there is to think about how can you set up a peer group or a learning community, right? Can you have a regular check-in with friends where they do homework together? Can you have them set goals together, not as in a competitive, I'm going to do better than you type of thing, but much more, what do we want to achieve together? Can you talk to other parents? Think about that concept of it's a village, right? It's difficult to do these things in isolation. So for example, going back to this growth mindset thing, you know, I've been trying to get back into my exercise, and every time I do that, I will reach out to somebody, and often it'll be Aliza, right? Can you please reach out to me and ask me if I did my yoga today? Or can you just check in and see that whether I did my 30-minute walk? So it's that feeling that there is a community and I'm accountable to someone. I work really well when that happens, right? So can you set that up for your child, whether it is through the school, whether through it is Jamaat Khana friends, REC friends, any other neighborhood community, see if you can set up small learning groups, or we're going to do this homework together, or these assignments are difficult. Why don't we set up a math learning group where the kids solve problems together and parents rotate and take turns supervising it? Use that community and try and tap into it. Was there a third question, Anita, that I missed? I think we did 2 questions. Did we cover it?
It was just overcoming the fear of failure or motivating the child who wants the reward before they do the work. That was the last one.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on the day. And I, you know, there are some days where your children will not start. You know, it's like when you're trying to kickstart a car and it just ain't starting. There's some days when a little bit of a reward to start off with is really helpful, right? It helps me get that little bit of motivation. Okay, for me, it's that cup of coffee. I need that cup of coffee. Sometimes you do need to do that. But I would say that, again, have that conversation that a reward or a treat is meant to be a treat. So it's a result of you treat yourself when you've achieved something, right? And so talking again and discussing why it's important to wait. There's a lot of research that shows that children who learn how to wait for a reward actually do. They followed kids like 20 years out and discovered that kids who've learned that, you know, if they're a little bit more patient and wait for the reward, 20 years down the road, they're the ones who make the better decisions, who are more resilient, who have more grit, right? So there's, I think it's called the marshmallow experiment, Elisa, if I'm not wrong. So really helping your child to wait for that reward actually will pay off, not just in the moment, not just today in COVID, but 20 years down the road. So have that conversation.
Thank you so much. Well, we have answered a lot of questions. We're down to our last 2. In the interest of time, several of you have stayed on the line. Thank you so much. We really hope this is helping all of you feel a little bit better. The next question I have, I've seen it a few times also now, is that there might be 2 kids or 3 kids or more in the house, and they're performing differently. One may finish their work really early, one may take longer, and then if you have a reward system set up, then one child is seeing the other one get all the rewards while they're not getting anything, and it creates this environment where there's comparison. And how do you manage all of that with multiple children and making sure that one's not getting a better deal than the other based on their interests?
Go ahead, Elisa.
So the one thing that's important to remember is rewards and consequences should not just be tied to academic work, right? So if it seems like one child, is more focused and can get something done faster, tie rewards to other things, tie rewards to chores, tie rewards to helping out in the household, tie rewards to, do they think about community? Do they think about service? I have someone who gets a reward based on how many plastic bottles they can collect to recycle. And then also think about what you're rewarding, right? So if you're rewarding speed, sure, but you might also want to reward completion, and you might also want to reward correct answers. So don't just have rewards tied to the thing that one child might be excelling at. Have rewards be tied to different things, because then your kids will also get interested in other things, and they'll understand that you value something more than just finishing work fast. Sharon, were you going to add something there?
You just said it so perfectly. I don't really have anything to add. That is perfect. Mix it up. Go back to we started off by talking about reward. Think about setting goals and being committed to learning as 2 main things you want your child to learn, right? So if you set the reward on that, then it's not about how fast you do something. It's about, did you meet the goals? Are you thinking about it? And you can do the goals over a period of time. So rather than say, did you finish your homework today? Think about it, over the last 5 days, who finished their goals that they had set? Who decided to learn something new, right? Or who completed the household chores? So mix it up in that way so that at every point, somebody is winning and getting a reward. And so it feels much more of a community and less of a competition where somebody is left behind.
Okay, great answers and great tips. I promised just 2 last questions, so this is the last question of the night. You can reach out through access to your education board, local teams, if you do have questions, and again, we will be sharing this presentation. So the last question, we've been focusing a lot on kids, as we should be, but Shumaila is asking us, we are losing our temper at times with our kids in the house, and basically, do you just have any tips on that? Like, what should we do when we're working with them at home? So we want to take care of the parents too tonight.
Yeah, self-compassion. It's step back and think about why you're losing your temper, right? There are times when all of us do, and we misdirect our frustration, and it's often whoever's in the line of sight gets the misdirected frustration or anger. Step back, stop, and whether it is 5 minutes in the bathroom or 20 minutes around the block, really just walking and thinking about it. Think about why you're frustrated. Once you think about why you're frustrated, think about, okay, what can I do about it? Is there something that I can change in this situation? Can I reframe? Can I be compassionate towards myself because I'm dealing with a lot right now? Can I talk and draw upon my village and say, who can I call right now so that instead of taking my anger and frustration out on my kids, because there's a lot to be angry and frustrated about right now, can I talk to a friend? Can I talk to a therapist? So think about all the different things. Main thing is step back, think about why, acknowledge your feelings, because sometimes you're angry, but you don't realize what you're angry about. So when you had a few minutes to think about what is it that's really bothering me. It takes me a few days, by the way, to figure that out sometimes. So take a few days if you have to. What is it that's making you so mad? And then really try and talk to your partner, talk to your family, talk to your friends, whoever it is that you have around you that can help with that. And please call Access where you feel like you can't deal with this alone, you need help, definitely call Access. But I think those are the things that have really helped me. There are a lot of other parents in this group. Call up some other parents and ask them, how are you dealing with this? You know, what are your tips for me? Help me get some perspective.
And a quick thing that I'll add to that great lineup is know that it's okay to be angry, right? So we talked about this, you're not alone. Your worries are not your only worries or, you know, your own worries. Everyone's worried about the same thing. Everyone's getting frustrated. Everyone's getting angry. This is a hard situation. So, you know, before, like Chair Noreen says, before you think about why you're angry and, you know, think about solutions, just take a step back and tell yourself, it's okay to be angry. This is hard. And that's also part of self-compassion. That's also part of how Chair Noreen started this session around take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and say, it's okay. What I'm feeling is valid. This is hard. And then move forward from there. So accept yourself, practice some self-love, and you'll do better by your kids as a result.
Okay, well, thank you so much again. Our panelists were fantastic. Thank you all for staying on the line for so long. And I know we may not have gotten exactly to your question, but we hope we were able to answer part of it or you learned something through the slides. Again, if you've registered for this webinar, as all of you have, you will be receiving a copy of it, and we'll find ways to post it and host other sessions, hopefully like this, to help you through this very challenging time. But please don't lose sight, and thank you so much, Yali Madad, and have a great night.
Yali Madad.
Yali Madad.